time and time again, people that connect with the best people do the best. And sometimes the best costs a little more, but you make more. I don't think saving cost is like a strategy in real estate that wins over time.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you're enjoying this show, please leave us a rating and review. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Johnny Wolff. Johnny Wolff is the founder and CEO of HomeRoom Coliving, elevating the home sharing concept to a new level. Now, he loves to discuss why he switched careers from financial analyst to full-time real estate investor and how his startup exploded during the global pandemic. Let's welcome to the show, Johnny Wolff.
Yeah. Hey, John, thanks so much for having me here. I'm a big fan of the show and excited to chat with you and your listeners.
Absolutely. Hey, well, thank you. It's great to have you on. You have an awesome name to kick things off. But, outside
Thank
of
you.
that, why don't you take 2 minutes and give us a little bit more context on your background?
Yeah, sure. So I started working in the Silicon Valley as a financial analyst um, right around the financial crisis, 2007, 2008. Started to buy my first real estate out of state, bought some homes in Midland, Texas with my retirement account. And learned from a couple of homes that I bought that way, the basics of single family home investing. Eventually decided in 2015 to move to Austin, Texas to invest in real estate relatively full time and rented out rooms in the homes that I bought. So I've done multifamily and single family. But the cool thing about what we do at HomeRoom is we sort of turn a single family home into a space that has multiple occupants. So you get a lot of the benefits of the single family, which is the appreciation and kind of that's detached from your net operating income. In addition to that, you get a lot of the stability of that multifamily ask or offers, which is, if you never have a $0 a month, you have consistent. Um, so we learn a lot from the multifamily industry. So really excited to be here to kind of share kind of how we think about that and have the discussion.
Yeah. So how did you get started in that space, right? So it's one thing to buy, multifamily or smaller multifamily, but to to buy kind of this house and rent to multiple people. Like, just walk us through kind of your process and how you got started and what that process looked like.
Yeah. Well, when you live in San Francisco, and I was living in like San Jose, San Francisco from 2008 to 2015. Everyone's broke all the time, and everyone lives with roommates. And so that's how I lived. I ran a roommate house that we rented from a landlord, and we just were all on the lease together. And then if someone would leave, we'd add another roommate, which is pretty common in like the more expensive markets. So when I moved to Austin, I was looking at properties to purchase, and the ones that I really liked from an appreciation standpoint, uh, they weren't cash flowing. So I decided to combine the way I'd lived and the way I wanted to invest, and so started to rent out rooms separately in each of the homes, and made a lot more rent. So that was kind of how homeroom was born. It was kind of a mixture of those two parts of my life.
It's really interesting, right? Because, for those of us who don't live in, super expensive markets like San Francisco or the Bay Area, the concept may be, a little different, but many people will go through this in college, right? I mean, that's what dorms are basically. You get four people and put them in one room together. And I mean, take me back now. I'm literally picturing being in my dorm room with three other roommates. I'm like, how in the world did four people live in this little? I mean, that thing was maybe 600 square feet, right? Like, anyway,
Right.
let me get back. Let me get back on the topic here. But that's something that is an experience you were able to draw on from being out in the Bay. You moved to Austin, couldn't really find good cash flowing properties, but you combined and kind of brought that same strategy that you were using out in the Bay and used it here in Austin. Now, when you did that, were there any regulatory things that you needed to understand or navigate, or is it simply just buy a house, rent it out to as many people as you can, and make money?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some interesting, short answer is when I did it, no, I didn't know that I needed to think about that. So that was interesting. But now, more as we're more established kind of as a company, we've housed thousands of roommates in this way. There's you know definitely pieces to that are important. We have a whole compliance department, legal and everything like that. So you have to be mindful when you're doing it of city kind of zoning, as well as sort of the legal structure with tenants. The cool thing about homeroom is we do all that for our investors. And we're actually happy to get with non-investors and answer questions how we see city compliance. We think that the restrictions on zoning allowing kind of non-related people, we are not a big fan, so we're doing everything we can to help change those laws as well as help people kind of work with them and around them as needed, because people need more affordable housing. And so allowing people to live and share space is really one of the cleanest, easiest, and accessible ways to do that today.
What are some of those regulations? I know that, I don't know if it's five or what that number is on how many non-related people can live in one dwelling, but maybe you can give us a little more enlightenment there.
Yeah, it's different for each city. There's some cities that it's up to 8, and sometimes it's as low as 2. They're laws that are relatively, they're pretty seldom, they're almost unenforceable in the sense that no one can see through walls, and unless someone's doing city inspection or cities are doing in-house inspections, it's really difficult. So it's one of those things that you kind of look at the law and you say, okay, in Austin, we're allowed to have 6, so we're going to do 6. We might do 7, and we will kind of like share that with the investor and say, do you want to go on more? The amount of times that's been an issue, and when you go one above, has been very, very seldom, and usually we'll work with the city and figure something out.
And is
Yeah, so
that,
it's
do you
just something.
determine that based on the number of bedrooms, or how do you kind of get a sense of how many roommates outside of the legality aspect of it? But when you're looking at a place, how do you get a sense based on kind of the actual physical home?
Yeah, we generally we do one per bedroom, one tenant per bedroom. So we're typically looking for homes with more bedrooms. Co-living numbers start to work at 3 bedrooms, but they get a lot better at 5, 6, and we have 7s as well. And so some of the time that'll mean adding some rooms into, let's say you have like there's some of these older homes have like dens, and they have second dining rooms and second living rooms and all these things that you kind of don't really need, although they're nice to have. But you turn it into a room, get it permitted, and now you have a space for another person, and so that adds more revenue, and it's pretty affordable to do that.
So I think, I'm thinking back to a property I used to own, and I had roommates in one of the units. Everyone else was families, and one unit was roommates. And sure enough, it just became a challenge, right? Roommates got into a fight. One roommate moved out. They had another roommate move in. The boyfriend moved in, and it just became a nightmare of a headache for me, right? It's like I don't want to deal with any of this. Like when y'all leases up, like y'all gotta go. How do you manage that, right? Especially with 1,000 roommates in these various properties. I mean, I imagine you get a lot of bickering and things that you don't want to really deal with as an investor, where you're now kind of being either a counselor or a therapist for some of these challenges. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, you navigate it like any other. I mean, like I think any system has its challenges. Just some systems have better processes to manage those challenges. So for example, one of the things we do is we do maid grades. So we have a cleaning service that'll go every month and then grade the house for cleanliness, because cleanliness can be kind of a tension between roommates. We allow for roommate meet and greets. We have a really great customer success team that will get on calls with people or answer questions via text with like a lot of knowledge based articles. We have policies and fines. So there's all these things that are, none of them are that complicated. You just have to make sure you have them all in place, and then the ecosystem stays relatively healthy. And occasionally people don't get along, and then they'll transfer to another home. That's one of the advantages. We have a lot of properties, and you can kind of move. We're playing with something that's similar to like Uber passenger score, where we rate roommates on a scale of 1 to 5. We just haven't quite got that off the ground yet. But there's all these different checks and balances, right? And if you build it into the way that your company works, interacts with customers, and communicate it well, then you have it's a lot less of a headache for us, and it really is not a headache for the investor at all.
Yeah. So as an investor, what does the model look like? Are you buying the homes and owning the property? Are you just focusing on kind of the rental income? Like, what does that business model look like?
Yeah, so we are full stack for investors. We generally start with an investor that is, they're either a seasoned investor or a fund, or they're a first-time real estate investor. They come to us. We will, you're going to need about 6 figures to work to get a co-living property set up between the purchase, down payment, and the construction and repairs. And so as long as, once we know that you're kind of good to go and you can afford to move forward, we'll then kind of like figure out what type of investor you are, what you're focused on, right? So we think of each version of each market as a different kind of style of investing, because you'll see markets like, Kansas City or Indianapolis. They're not a lot of growth there, not a lot of net migration, not a lot of the income growth is relatively mild. You see a lot less volatility in those markets. Even in the like kind of the crash, even right now, those markets are not being hit. It's just like kind of like steady as she goes. So those are really the yield markets. Will kind of, if people want yield, and then we have markets that have a bit more upside, a bit more of a kicker, like an Austin or a Dallas or a Tampa. Those are a bit more volatile, but they definitely have a lot more upside based on a lot of the fundamentals of the economy in terms of net migration growth, income growth. And we look at other factors as well in terms of like the demographic and age of people that live there and how that trending over time. Um, so yeah, so as an investor, we'll kind of figure out what type you are and then connect you to a market. Then we'll begin look at sourcing homes with our data team that will match what you're looking for in that market.
Now,
And then
talk to me
you
about.
will, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna
Sorry.
say, talk about that team, right? So you've obviously been able to scale. You're talking about, some stuff in Texas, some stuff in Indianapolis, Kansas City. You're in different markets, managing those teams, the construction, the renovation, moving in, moving out of the residents there. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts. Talk to me about how you've been able to scale this business to kind of navigate this across multiple markets.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that I wanted to do early. One of the challenges I saw with turnkey providers, or at least, the couple that I had experienced, and I don't, this isn't like a damnation against the industry, but is that they are in very select markets. And so then everything, it's like you either invest in Memphis or what are you doing? It's like, and then, as someone that did the analysis on Memphis and all these kind of more cash flow markets, I was like, I don't really want to invest in Memphis, right? I want to be able to select the market and follow trends and invest where appreciation has the most opportunity, sort of like an institution. So we really wanted to get into multiple markets relatively quickly so that investors didn't feel like we were like force feeding them into a certain market. Um, and so to do that, we followed the playbook that we saw a lot of other property operations companies doing that we liked. Mind, for example, Darwin Homes, Roofstock has an operation that does things similar to this. The old school, Waypoint Homes is kind of like the OG of like these multi-market operating models, and a lot of it has to do with like building a really good remote operating team with local presence as well. And so we were able to do that, and it allowed us to scale kind of from like 1 to 2 to 10 markets in 30 cities, in like 18 months. So it sounds crazy, but in 2005, it would have been a huge mistake for anyone to try to do something like that. But in 2020, it became, relatively feasible with video doorbells, smart locks, a lot of the technology that you could use to monitor homes. So you can replace a lot of the core functions, and then you get local contacts who are kind of like making sure that they're viewing the home regularly. So it's all about systems and processes. It's all about building a lot of the proficiencies centrally and empowering people in other markets.
No, it sounds great, man. When you're able to scale at that level, definitely opportunities to grow, and technology certainly has made that a little bit easier. Nonetheless, it's still a
Mhm.
people business, right? It still comes down to the individuals, getting the right people on your team. with that amount of growth in such a short period of time, I imagine finding the right team members, whether that's vendors, employees, finding those right team members had to be a challenge. Give me just something you've learned through that process, or maybe a little tip for anyone looking to scale a business and hire folks, whether that be direct employees or vendors, to support them in their business.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Hiring employees, I think, yeah, I think that that's, one of the, if you're gonna, if you're starting a business and you're trying to scale it, I think, yeah, but the team that you choose is really like the biggest, I'd say the biggest. I think the vision of the company, maybe the foundation, but like the block on top of that vision, is the team that you kind of recruit and choose. So I think, um, being super selective and defining exactly what team members you need and what exact skills those team members have. For example, um, our operations guide done, 5 to 10,000 rehabs and built teams to support maintenance as well, and build teams overseas. And so it's like, okay, that's exactly what we're looking for. And so it's, when you're trying to find team members, I think you have to balance because you only have so much time, and like it feels like hiring someone over 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 months is just too long. And it's a ton of work. But if you can do that well enough, like you can be the foundation for which you can kind of do that kind of skill. If you don't have a great team and you try to accomplish something like that quickly, then, it all kind of implode. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so that's really, I think it's about being highly selective. We like to do skills tests when all of our hires, regardless of the role, because we want to make sure that the person is like mentally adaptable and flexible, but also has some elite skills. And that really depends on which role they're in maintenance. They have like a pretty good maintenance test, and finance and asset management that's like in a kind of advanced like Excel modeling. But we want to make sure that you can talk good, but you can also like do elite level work at the same time. So a bit of both, and those people are hard to find, especially in newer companies. But
Yeah.
if you look really hard and you send a lot of outbound messages, you can build a great team.
Yeah. I imagine too, with, the shortage of labor, it makes it even more challenging to find those great employees. But you obviously were able to find folks who can help you grow this business. Out of curiosity, you mentioned kind of a skills test, and I get like a financial analysis type test or something like that. What are you doing for maintenance? Like, how are you testing someone's aptitude for maintenance for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on like kind of like your tech ecosystem, right? And so like if are you using something that's very simple like and kind of like everyone knows in the industry like a Yardi and multifamily, and so everyone's trained on the software. Are you using something where you're creating something a bit different, right? In our case, because we're using single family and multifamily concepts. So we would test people in two ways. We test them on specific maintenance issues and what they would do, and then we also test people on specific technology navigation, right? So that would be something like, here are our softwares, here's a test login. We want you to actually navigate this in real time and solve problems. Um, and then you kind of see candidates and you kind of like hear them talking, and then you can kind of see if they say that they're great and then they actually perform poorly in the actual performance test, then you understand like, okay, this person may not be as good as they think they are. But if they say they're pretty good and then they nail it, then you're like, well, at least then that kind of helps me benchmark the rest of what they say. Cause you really want to dig deep on not missing on those early hires that you work so hard to do. Cause a lot of times you're maybe 2 or 4 weeks away from getting the great hire. Cause it takes a month to really source, 2 months to really get in the groove, maybe. And this all can be much shorter depending on the role. But when we were looking at like the core team, the leadership team, essentially, we were
Makes sense.
spending months. Yeah.
Yep, makes sense. Makes sense. Appreciate you sharing that context there. Let's talk about the investors, right? I mean, obviously, when you're investing, you want to invest to make money and make some returns. You talked about, one of the challenges or the pros and cons of investing with kind of a turnkey provider where you're buying a property, it's already renovated. They're gonna, put a renter in there and just write you checks, in theory at least. So that's kind of turnkey. Talk to us about what investors can expect, or what's a typical. I don't want to get into returns necessarily, but just what's typical for investing in these co-living type properties.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar to that. There's a little, we'll help you pick a market. We'll help you figure out your budget, and then we'll help you purchase the home. We have brokerage, or we have agent presences in all the markets. Mostly we're buying on-market deals, but we'll also have some off-market deals occasionally. And then you'll write us a check to do kind of the rehab of the property if there's repairs in the, as well as add bedrooms if we think that that's the right move for the property. Most of the time, we do. And then we'll do the rehab usually on schedule and on budget, and we'll get it rented up. So that then you'll start getting checks. The cool thing about renting out rooms is you'll usually get the first check like the first month-ish it's live, because you'll usually get a roommate, and then you'll start to get more and more, and then it'll get fully occupied over time. So
Love it,
yeah,
love
it's
it.
pretty relaxed. Not much different than the turnkey model, just a little bit more kind of, we're working with you a little bit closer.
And to use some numbers for those folks who need that for illustration purposes, like
Mhm.
for the co-living space, you're obviously renting now by the bedroom as opposed to the entire home. What are you typically, and again, just pick a market. I know it's going to vary based on the market, but when you're looking at a typical deal or an average deal, how do the rents compare if you were to rent that as a home to a family versus renting it by the room to a group of 4, 5, or 6 roommates?
Yeah, we like to say you'll make 50% more rent. That's pretty general. The truth of it is that when you rent by the room, you have a little bit of variability, because each room is like its own unit. There's different, windows and location and all that stuff. And so we have homes that'll actually make double like what you would make if you rented as a single family home. We have other homes that make 10-20% more, or some make the same. But on average, it kind of is that 30 to 60% kind of more for the whole portfolio. So definitely quite a bit more yield. A little bit more work on our part for sure, but you can definitely make more money if all things work out.
So outside of the increased logistics, right? You have more residents, more leases, more people kind of moving in and out of the home. What are some other variables or considerations investors should know about if their background is maybe more single family investing or multifamily investing, and they're now looking at kind of the co-living model?
Yeah, I mean, it's an emerging space, right? It's like, it's where Airbnb was 10 years ago. And so what that means is like, you'll make more money. Um, there's a little bit more, the industry is still learning, right? And the industry is still developing. And so and there will be changes, there'll be improvements over time, and you'll make a lot of money, and that'll go up over time, but it's not as predictable, I think, and as a standard single family rental where like 500 people know how much a house at this address will rent for. When you rent by the room, we have a great data science team with millions of data records. There's going to be a lot more wiggle to that. And same with Airbnb, right? Airbnb has gotten pretty good at predicting what your occupancy and what your income will be, but it's not perfect. Until you put that asset live, you're still kind of like it's an investment in that way,
Yeah.
right? With a single family turnkey home, the numbers are pretty locked in, just not, in my opinion, at this point, super attractive from a return standpoint.
Describe kind of the resident base for this co-living scenario. Is this that younger, right out of college type demographic, or am I misguided there?
Average age is 29. We have people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I don't think we have anyone in their 70s. I don't actually know. I don't think so. But yeah, it's pretty mixed. I mean, we're 30% cheaper than a studio apartment in the same neighborhood. And from what we hear, housing affordability is an issue right now. So there's a lot of demand for cheaper, right? And so that comes from all ages. There's a big density though around in the 20s for sure. 20s and 30s is a big percentage of our tenant base.
There you go. Well, listen, I think it's like you said, it's a newer model, a newer industry that is
Mhm.
continuing to emerge and grow. And in some markets, I imagine that it's going to be more successful than other markets. But this is why you want someone who is on your team, who really understands this space and can help you learn. And your team, I know Johnny can help do that. So if you want to learn more about kind of this co-living model and working with Johnny, you can visit their website at livehomeroom.com. That's livehomeroom.com/invest. And you can learn a little bit more about the company and kind of what they're working on there. Johnny, we're going to go to our round of insights. You ready?
Sweet, man. Let's do some insights.
All right. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Hmm. Yeah, I think, when I first launched the company in 2018, I'd done some financial modeling. It's my background in finance. And so I thought I was like, this is, slam dunk. So we brought on a lot of people kind of locally, Kansas City, to like go lease the thing. We bought our own furniture. We master leased the homes. And getting started really fast was good. I think getting started and hiring a number of people with kind of money I had gotten out from a real estate or for investment property I had sold was not so good. I think it's better to hire slower. I think it's better to hire more strategically. I think it's better to not I think caution's certainly the wrong word. Move as fast as you freaking can. But I think it's good to start figuring out, learning, iterating your product with a small core of really great people. Maybe just you and a partner, maybe you and a few people. Because if you have a lot of moving pieces, it gets really hard to focus on your product and your offering. And so I would say that's learning. Then from there, I spent me and one other guy in my basement working for like a year, and that's when we kind of learned how to create the business that we have today. So some progress was made in that initial flurry of like 15 people. Not that much. A lot more was made with just 2.
There you go. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Sorry, what was the second? Digital or physical
mobile,
resource?
just an app or a resource that you like for your business.
Cool. Yeah, we really like Lateral. It's a kind of a single family home like maintenance service provider. It allows people to kind of submit their tickets, and there's a workflow that helps. There's 1,500 issues that can go wrong in a house that we've mapped, but they've kind of like figured out a way to help tenants who don't really know maintenance to diagnose it as much as they can for you. So we're big fans.
What's the name again?
It's called Lateral.
Lateral? Okay. We'll make sure we link to that in the show notes. Thanks for sharing that. All right. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Should probably give more book gifts. I feel guilty now. Yeah, I like The 50th Law by Robert Greene. It's about taking bold risk and how safe we all really are in today's society.
All right. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Daily habit, definitely going to the gym.
All right. Give me your number one insight for co-living investing.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. It's a similar vein that I would give to someone in single family or even multi is like pay top dollar for your management company. Get the best management company possible. I think the really unless you have your own kind of like unless you built your own company to invest, right? I think in which case then you can maybe get by with somebody, some guy. But I think the value, the invisible value of like a great operator, it it's invisible, especially to newer investors, is just it's just so fundamentally important. When someone's asking the next question over and over again about making your investment do better, instead of you having to be like watching over their shoulder, trying to like, you know, uh, you know, backseat drive, a little bit and like try to get them to help you solve problems. If you have someone that's actually thinking like that and you can kind of trust them to do it, they're going to move faster and your returns are going to be just a ton better over 10 years. You may have to pay a little bit more every month, right? You may have to pay a little bit more in maintenance because they'll tell you to do preventative stuff. But the time and time again, people that connect with the best people do the best. And sometimes the best costs a little more, but you make more. I don't think saving cost is like a strategy in real estate that wins over time.
That's a great tip, and I couldn't echo that more. You get the best people you can get on your team and go from there because they're going to save you money in some capacity, either because they're going to be more efficient, they're going to have some connections, they're going to know how to solve issues that won't be as expensive. So don't let that initial sticker shock of their fees or whatever, don't let that deter you from hiring or partnering with the right people who actually know their stuff. So it'll save you in the long run if you trust that process.
Yeah, I mean, you just see it a lot, right? You just see you talk to these investors, they're on bigger pockets, right? They're having these like conversations about like a $20 fee or something that's insignificant, and like no one's talking about like the value created by the great providers, which is like access to better off market real estate, innovative offerings that are going to kind of maximize occupancy and deter kind of bad tenants, like all this stuff that most investors don't know, and they're just fixated on just the wrong thing, right? And so the great deals I've gotten in my portfolio have been because I connected with great investment agents so I mean, like, pay for the best, man. Like, just do it. You're not as smart as you think you are in real estate, right? No matter how long you've been in it. If you work as a software developer at Facebook, you're not smarter than property operators at real estate. It's their jobs.
There you go. Well, let's lighten the mood, man. You are based in KC. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Yeah, KC Joe's is barbecue that I really like. Yeah, that's probably my favorite right now. Although every time you eat it, you feel like you don't feel so good afterwards. You feel pretty tired.
Got the itis kicking in right after that barbecue.
Yeah. You just really want the longest nap you could possibly have.
Oh man. Well, listen, Johnny, I think I got some really good value from our conversation, man. Just to recap a little bit of it, you talked about making that transition from the space you're in as in finance and getting into real estate, particularly this co-living space. Taking kind of the same concept you were doing out there in the Bay, bringing it to Austin, and now you have built this company where you're investing in over 30 markets, taking these same strategies and figuring out how to maximize returns in these single family houses through co-living with roommates. Again, for anybody who wants to learn more, they can go to livehomeroom.com/invest, and they can learn a little bit more about working with you and your team. Again, Johnny, I just want to thank you for coming on the show today. We look forward to staying in touch, and I hope you have a great one.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate you having me, John. I really enjoyed chatting with you and your listeners.